everyone, welcome back to the Pommy in Oz channel, and something a bit different for you because I don't know if I could be sued for copyright because technically I'm not the only Pommy in Oz. I may be the only Pommy in Oz in your eyes. There is a lot of us, and I'm joined by, I would say, one of the more iconic voices in State League football, the great man himself, Oliver Walker-Peel, another Pom. How are you doing, mate?
I'm very well, mate, and yeah, no copyright issues from me, mate. They're absolutely fine. But it's nice to be joined by another Pommy here, and thanks for having us.
Yeah, you know what? Where do you stand on the term Pommy? Everywhere I've worked, there's always an English guy who takes exception to being called a Pom, and it's something that's never really bothered me.
Listen, I'm someone who's grown up with cerebral palsy, so I've had so many insults thrown at me, so many terms thrown at me. That one's fine by me. Like I've had so much worse. So look, there are some people that will go, "Oh, like, are you offended by that?" I'm like, no. Like, at the end of the day, it's most of the time well-meaning. So if it's directed at me, I'm happy with it. There might be some that might not be, and that's fine to them. But to me, I don't mind.
Well, we know that you're a massive Blackburn fan, so just tell the audience at home, how did a Blackburn Rovers loving boy turn up on Australia's doorstep? What happened there? How did he come over here?
So, as you say, Blackburn fan, massive Blackburn fan. I grew up in Blackburn in a family of Burnley fans. My dad's side of the family's all Burnley, and a lot of Australians might not understand how treacherous me supporting Blackburn is in that scenario. But I grew up in Blackburn, a decent-sized little town where it's cold, a little bit miserable at times, but I love it because it's home to me. But we had football. I grew up on our training ground, so I love Blackburn. I passed the training ground every single time I went anywhere, and I used to go to games every second Saturday. I'd go to Ewood Park, our home ground, and watch Rovers, and that's how my love for sport came about. And I moved out here at the age of 9, so I was quite young. Been over here, I think it's actually 11 years today that we left. It's the 11-year anniversary today of when we left England to come to Australia. And I moved out to Mount Martha. We had cousins that moved out a couple of years earlier, and they were St Kilda supporters. So they got me, talking about Aussie rules, and I got on the St Kilda bandwagon. And from there, I'm just as the time round one rolled around in 2014, I was just a 10-year-old kid living in Victoria. And how many 10-year-old kids in Victoria love Aussie rules? And I was just another one of them. So I used to watch the Saints whenever I could. I would sit on the couch Super Saturday, and from 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'd be watching the footy, and it's so good. And then from there, the rest is history, I suppose.
Could an English guy have chosen a better football club? Because it's something, my wife is a massive Saints girl. She's Aussie born. Always tried to get me on their bandwagon. And when I look at their history, 1966, their last flag, you're wearing the Free Lions. We all know our dads, our granddads have all told us the glory year, winning the World Cup. It's kind of just a sideways step, isn't it?
It is, and I love footy. I love the Saints. I go whenever I can, which now isn't a lot with commentary, but it was just one of those things that we don't win every week, but it's a special feeling going to a game and being around some of your own fans. And I think being a Saints fan, it's a community feel. Yeah, of course we don't win every week, and we'd love it. I miss the glory years of 2009 and 2010 when we came close a couple of times, and there'll be plenty of Saints fans my age and a bit older who could recount those days to you. I couldn't because I wasn't here. The first season that I moved over was 2014. We won the Spoon, so that just tells you everything. I was set up, but no, I love it, and obviously there's the nice connection with 1966 and Barry Breen and Jeff Hurst and whoever else. So there's a nice link. I love it.
It's something that Australians continually ask about 1966, and it does make me remember just how tough it would be for St Kilda, because that is a long time. It is, like, especially when you play it every year. Like, my excuse is with England, we only play every 4 years, so like it's not as long as you actually think it is. But how does, I mean, obviously, like, I learned the game similar to you. We were very similar in the amount of time. I moved over it would have been 13 years ago now, 2011. So I kind of feel what you said there, because Carlton have been rubbish since I came. And ironically, my mates back home say Manchester United have been rubbish since I left. So I could be cursed. Like I could be the
Maybe.
Carlton curse and the Manchester curse because I've left. But how did you not only learn the game, Oliver, which is hard enough because it is totally different to anything we've seen, but you've also managed to learn it so much you can commentate effortlessly on the game. How did that come about?
Well, in terms of learning the game, as I say, I used to watch it whenever I could. So it would be hours and hours. My weekends would revolve around Aussie rules. And so when you are able to watch it that much, you pick up the little things and you learn what it's like. And I've done that with sports since. And I feel like I'm someone who can learn things quite quickly, particularly if it's something I'm interested in. I'll try and pick up the little things and go from there. In terms of commentating it, the first game I ever did was in 2021. So by that point, I'd been over here, 7, 8 years? And so you're able to then build up that repertoire of knowing the game. I'd done a season of football a couple of years earlier, just before the pandemic. So I'd got a bit of broadcasting craft, if you like. And then you just build from there. Of course, my first game of Aussie rules wasn't as good then as I would say I am now, because of course you've got to improve and you've got to build things, but you've got to start somewhere, I suppose. The first game I ever did was Frankston and Coburg. I've been back to Frankston many times. I love it every time. But yeah, it was a challenge early on, of course, as everything is, I suppose, but it's something that I'm glad I've done and hope to continue to do.
I've got to say, it's something that is really refreshing when I watch a lot of State League football for this show, and there is something quite refreshing about hearing an Englishman do it. And it's weird because I don't hear the accent when I first came over here, but like now, you really do hear it. Like when you hear the same Australian accent, no offense to Australians, every day, that the English twang is there. And you've brought, like, it has to be said, a kind of football flavour to your commentary. We did talk about it off camera. You are quite iconic the way you commentate a goal, which my bugbear, being English, I know there's a lot of goals in footy, they don't really get as excited. You've got that, you have that moment, and do you try and bring that excitement? And is that kind of an inspiration from listening to English sport commentated, which is quite theatrical?
Somewhat. I think a lot of my football broadcasting idols are quite theatrical. Peter Drury being one of them, who is the nominal poet. The wordsmith, the passages he comes out with are unbelievable. And I think that, of course, you might have said I'd bring a football flavour. Of course, it's a balance, right? Because, of course, it's Australian rules. So you've got to honour the game, you've got to honour the history, you've got to honour the terms, you've got to honour everything like that. But you can also bring in other things. And I think that if I'm bringing a slightly different aspect to it, then that's obviously great. It's nice to be able to merge the two. I think that my football commentaries help my Aussie rules, and my Aussie rules commentaries help my football. So it's nice to have that go hand in hand. But yeah, I would say that I've been inspired by many different voices, and they've obviously then helped me. And I think in terms of excitement, I think there are some moments that are obviously more exciting than others. A kick after the siren, which I've had one of, versus a goal in time on in the fourth quarter when a team's down by 70 points. There are different levels of excitement you need to hit. Of course, one after the siren is like a massive thing, and a goal that, when you're 70 points down in the fourth and going to lose, unless it's the first goal for a player in their career, you don't hit those same levels. But it's just about finding a balance and keeping things interesting, because, of course, you do it for the audience. And so you've got to keep the audience interested, because that's what you do it for. And if you can find ways to do that, then I think you're in the right place.
You mentioned Peter Drury there. It's quite funny because, like, going back through like my era of watching our game, there's people like John Motson who strike a chord in my ear. Like, if I hear his voice, I think football. Drury's another one as well. Peter, you just instantly think football, round ball straight away. We don't really have that, do you? Like, you don't have that kind of, like, the way I remember watching the Man United when Ronaldo came back, and his whole monologue as Ronaldo walked out and went to the centre circle is like you had a tear in your eye. Like it was like literally that good. Is that something that you can see? Because in my opinion, I find AFL media maybe about 20 years behind where we have it in Europe. Is that something that you can see coming in where that the commentary is so much complained about in Australia that in the UK it's kind of the complement piece, isn't it, of the football? We genuinely like our commentators.
It's one of those that people can have differing opinions. There are a fair few people that won't like my style and the way I go about it, and that's fine. I think that people can have their opinions, but the way I see it, I'll always try and have the viewer front of mind, because like I said before, that's why we do it. And I think that there's so much good in the AFL media, not just in terms of commentators, but in terms of broadcasters. There's so many people who are on the way up. And I think that the future of Australian rules footy media is bright. It's very, very bright, in my opinion. And look, of course, there's not the world reach of Australian rules that football has. And of course, football, you've had, however many people from however many places are trying to put their stamp on Aussie rules. And of course, the game's sort of been in a worldwide light for longer than Aussie rules has been. So maybe that plays into it. I don't know. But yeah, people can have their opinions. I enjoy listening to Aussie rules commentators. I think that across radio and TV, there's plenty who have made their mark on my style. Of course, there'll be certain people that don't like certain callers, but I think I'm a little bit more sympathetic to commentary. I feel like a lot of people who perhaps complain about commentary maybe don't have an idea of what it's like and don't understand sometimes how hard it is. But again, I'm not going to stop people from having an opinion, but of course, context is also important because it is a hard job.
Oh, I'd imagine watching this game compared to any other game, how quickly it happens, how much different things happen in 1 minute. It must be a nightmare to keep on top of that because there is little battles and little pockets of action all over the ground where any other sport, I think even if you look at basketball, football, cricket, it's kind of only one thing happening at any one time, which is kind of easy to focus. How do you do that when you're at the ground? Because obviously this is something that I didn't realise as well. My complaint about when you go to the games is from our game, you're kind of on top of the players in England, aren't you? It's almost like you could touch the players. You guys are like hidden away, aren't you? When you're doing the commentary as well, you haven't exactly got the greatest seats in the house. How hard is that to adjust to make sure you're keeping up with the game? Because I've sat in the commentary boxes. It's not an easy job, is it? It's not the easiest angle either.
No, it's not the easiest job at all. And you have to come to terms with, I think, when you're an Aussie rules commentator, you're going to miss certain things. And there's some moments where you just don't see it. And you'll get somebody come up to you at quarter time. It happened earlier this year. And you go, "Oh, did you see this? Did you see this?" I'm like, "No." And they want your opinion on it, and you miss it because you're following something that's happening 100 yards further forward on the ball, and something happens off the ball, and it's like, "Oh no, what do you do?" But it is hard. I think there's some places where I've called before where you don't get the best angle, but there's also been some unbelievable places that I've called. I've called the MCG at GMHBA, particularly. They're the two that spring to mind of like being in a professional space where obviously the AFL media are there week in, week out, and the views you get from those are obviously spectacular, but it's just blending between the two. Sometimes you don't get the best view, but you've just got to play with the cards you dealt and go from there.
And we've seen the AFL, obviously they've split the TV rights, lots of opportunities now for a new wave. And I think I kind of get the feeling that the AFL are trying to follow the model of the other sports in the world as well and bring the younger people through and bring the future faces through. What in the future, Ollie, is the dream? Like, where are we looking? Are we going to be Friday night, big lights? I'm going to turn on the TV and I'm going to hear your dulcet tones.
Well, that'd be lovely, wouldn't it? That'd be lovely.
It would.
I just want to get as high as I can. Obviously, the dream when I first came over was to get to the AFL Women's and the AFL. I've done the AFLW on radio. I love it. It's a privilege every single time I get the opportunity. I realise how lucky I am, and I've spent 3 seasons now with a couple of awesome broadcasters who I love, and that's great. The AFL, I haven't got there yet, the men's side of things, and I'd love to. That'd be obviously brilliant. Like I said before, the future of commentary and broadcasting in this country is so, so bright. So bright. The people that I can call colleagues at uni, or the people that I see, not only just here in Victoria, but across the country, there are so many people that you're going to have to become acquainted with soon. And it's going to be good fun, hopefully working with some of them. Of course, I'm not going to rest on my laurels. I know that I'm going to have to work hard to stay in the public eye, if you like, and compete, for lack of a better word, with some of these awesome broadcasters that are coming up. But hopefully I get the chance to work with a few of them, because I've seen it, even with the KO call-up that's been happening recently. You look at some of the videos that are coming out are awesome, and it's so good to see. Of course, it's going to be hard for KO to pick one, because there's going to be so many who are going to throw their hat in the ring. But yeah, it's awesome to see, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
We did enjoy your KO call-up. The Pommy and Oz channel hasn't sided with any KO call-up, but you did get me. You did the tea bag, making a cup of tea. Absolutely phenomenal. And that is a great segue into the differences. You talked about Burnley and Blackburn at the top of the show. And that's probably the biggest difference, in my opinion, from AFL to English football, is the rivalries here do exist, but they're not built in probably that. Like I always say, English rivalries are built on religious boundaries. They're built on the famous Manchester United Liverpool, built on the Dockers betraying the other Dockers and taking on the contract when they were both striking. English folklore is like a historical thing, isn't it? Where in the AFL, it's a lot more friendly, isn't it? Like they all sit together. I mean, you wouldn't see Blackburn versus Burnley, Ewood Park, and Burnley fans sat arm in arm with Blackburn fans, would you?
No, you wouldn't. And just to give people a bit of context, if you're unaware, Blackburn and Burnley, the rivalry that I'm embroiled in, if you like, not only with me, but also with my dad's side of the family who are on the other side of it, it's crazy. Up until recently, you couldn't go to the game yourself. You needed to be, if you're an away fan, let's say if you're a Blackburn fan living in Burnley, you'd have to go from Burnley to Blackburn to our stadium, get in a police escort and go back to Burnley, go back to Blackburn after the game, and then back to Burnley, because they don't want people driving by themselves. That's the levels. I've not seen that over here. I've not seen that over here at all. But I think that they're different games, right? I think that comparing them is a bit interesting. Of course, the rivalries do exist, and there's a lot of heated ones. Obviously, Carlton Collingwood, you'll know, historically is one of them. Some of my favourite rivalries are the one out of Victoria, with the Derby, as they call it, with West Coast and Fremantle. And yeah, for me, it's Derby, but I'm not gonna start that here.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna start that here. If it's a Derby for Western Australia, it's a Derby for Western Australia, and that's what we'll run with. But the Derby, the showdown, it sounds strange to me, but we'll go with it. And then, of course, the Derby in Sydney as well is good. But there's so many great rivalries here too. They're different to the ones back in the UK, but they're different games.
The Derby one always reminds me of, I did my university at Birmingham, and when they say Derby, that is legit how every Brummie I know would tell me Birmingham are playing Derby County. Like, it always makes me think of that. They'd be like, oh, we got Derby County, and I'm like, okay, you've got Derby. Okay, cool. That'd be a good game. You know, the other funny Australianism, now you've said it, is James Brayshaw loves debut instead of debut.
Mm.
And that one always throws me when he's like, oh, he's the first player to get 50 on debut. And I'm like, what's with the overemphasis on the A in debut?
James Brayshaw isn't the only one who does it. I think that's an Australian thing. I think that the Australian accent, there's plenty of words that just sound different with different accents. Like if I was to go full northern here, there wouldn't be a the in anything that I'm saying. So just different people say different things. I'll always go debut. There are some times where I've said debut. I'll admit to it, because just a product of your own surroundings and whatever else. But I think,
It's
I'll always go
infectious.
W. It is. And you just, I suppose you sort of fall into who you're calling with. If I'm calling with someone with a particularly strong Australian accent, then I have a tendency to then maybe pick up some of their Australianisms a little bit while I'm on air. Of course, there'll be different ways that I'll say things. For example, if I was to say penalise or penalise is the one that I always go to. There's different ways of saying different things, but as long as you understand what they mean, I don't have a massive problem with it. The obvious one is, I suppose, soccer and football. Now, I'll always call it football, but if there's an Australian that's going to call it soccer, I'm not going to be too mad about it.
That's a tough one if you ever go back home and you accidentally use the S word. Like that is punishable. That is the UK. It slipped out a few times with me as well, where I'm so used to speaking to an Aussie about it, so I'll call it soccer, and you'll just say it, and it's like the room, just all the air escapes the room. He said the S word.
If you're in a pub and you say it, you're getting chased out. If you've got a pint there, you're not having the rest of that pint. You're out of there.
The soccer, oh dear, it sounds so weird to me. It really does. It's still now. But Ollie, the big one we talked about is, you talked about the St Kilda connection, and I'd say that's one thing that is incredibly similar between our two great games. You see a St Kilda shirt, you're like, "G'day, mate, go Saints." I see a Carlton one, I'm the same, go Blues. One thing that does remain constant, though, isn't it, is that community feel of your football club, which is so important, which I think transcends rivalry, which transcends history, is that connection. And we've all had that story. You go to Thailand, you go to Spain, you wear your Man United shirt, you always have that holiday best mate, don't you? Who becomes your best mate for 2 weeks. You never see him again. But because you share the same love of the club, your friends. Did that help you integrate? Because I would say, for me, the biggest integration here outside of my wife is the football club. Like, that ability to always have friends, camaraderie, part of something bigger than yourself. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, absolutely. And someone my age, of course, I was going to primary school when I came over. And of course, the talk of the town is obviously your club. And I've made the circles that I would fall into are the sports circles usually. Of course, I've got other interests, but it would be the case of on a Monday morning, 9 o'clock, you're all into your first class of the day and you're talking about what's happened at the weekend. You're talking about the results, the big moments, the potential suspensions. You're talking about Supercoach. You're talking about whatever else. And it's like, it's that sense of community that you just fall into. And it's one of those, as you say, like you see a Carlton jumper on your side of things and you can have that conversation with somebody. If you've never met them before, you see that emblem on their shirt, you just know, okay, I've got something in common with this person. You can start a conversation. It's like I'll be going to the footy, and it happened round 1 for me. I've not seen the Saints men's team play interstate. I've commentated the women's team once in Hobart, which was awesome. I've never seen the Saints lads play interstate. The closest I've got to an away day, which was an away day, was Geelong. I did Geelong round 1 this year when we lost, I think it was by a couple of points. We came back late and almost stole it. But we were sat with a bunch of Saints fans, and that was the closest I've been to an away day. I've done 2 Blackburn away days, and it's the same. It's that sense of connection. You just feel a part of it. And I think that that's something that Australian clubs do particularly well, is they understand their fan base and they understand the people around it. And of course, English clubs do too. But it's that thing where if you see somebody wearing your colours, you can have that conversation and you can high five and celebrate. You might never see him again, but you get that moment. And I think that's one of the best things, not only about Aussie rules, but about sport in general.
There is something magical, isn't there? Just the stupidity of wearing a shirt. You don't ask any questions. Are they a nice guy? Do we have any of your interests? I've had so many times, 18 to 40 now, where I've been overseas and you see a Manchester United shirt, you see a Carlton shirt, and he becomes your best mate for 24 hours. Like, I don't care why he's there, don't care his history. He's now my mate, and we're going to drink tonight. And then tomorrow, I never see him again. It's a fascinating thing, isn't it? That kind of breaks every language barrier and every cultural divide.
Yeah, sport's great for that. And obviously with Man United, of course, one of the biggest clubs in the world, some would argue the biggest, you're going to see a lot of that. You don't get that as much with the Blackburn, but that's what it is. But even still, it's the same thing.
I think that's what makes it magical, though, being a smaller club. So, like,
I agree.
I spent a lot of my teens when we moved to Whitby, going to Whitby like because it was literally on my doorstep. So
Yeah.
used to go to them home and away. And in the rare occasion I've seen a Whitby shirt, it's even more special because I'm like, it's an insignificant seaside town in the northeast of England. We are in Portugal, and you are wearing the shirt from this town. It is kind of an excitement thing, isn't it?
It is. And I'm just trying to remember the last time I saw a Blackburn shirt out of Blackburn. I think the last one I can remember was the Ashes. The Ashes over here a few years ago, or might have been the T20 World Cup. It was a cricket event that England were involved in at the MCG. It was the Ashes. It was. Last time England were over, 4 years ago, the men's Ashes, and I saw a Blackburn shirt, and we were just chatting for like a few hours, and the I suppose the other side of that is ran into a Burnley fan 2 hours later, and he was not having a bar of me, but like, but it's one of those things where it's like you just have that shirt, you have that piece of paraphernalia that has a connection to your town. I feel so connected when I'm watching Blackburn play at 2 a.m. that, nothing else gives me to Blackburn. Very little else gives me to Blackburn because I'm so far away from Blackburn. Hard to feel connected when you're 17, 18,000 kilometers away. But when I'm watching the football at 2 o'clock in the morning over here, you get that. And it's so nice when you go back. We were saying off air that I went back in January, went to Blackburn a couple of times, and you get that real sense of connection back. Traveling away on the coach to Birmingham as I did, went to West Brom away and we got smashed, but by the by. But you get that connection back, and it's a special thing. And it's one of those things about Aussie rules. If we bring it back, circle it back, no matter who you support, no matter who my mate supports, I've got friends, Carlton, North Melbourne, Hawthorn, Melbourne, whatever else, but you can still talk about the game no matter who you support. And I think that the great thing about Australian rules is it's so ingrained in this nation's culture all the way back, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and it's great to be involved in. And that's one of the reasons why I gravitate so much to the sport, and why I'd love to be able to commentate as high as I can, is because so many people care about it. So many people, their lives revolve around a weekend and going to the MCG or Marvel or the SCG or wherever it is. And I think it's a really special thing. Even if it's a dead rubber game, for example, if it's 11th v 12th, round 24 of the season, it's special to somebody. And I think that's why I love it so much, and you just want to be wrapped up in it.
I think you've nailed it. I think it's such a beautiful game, and it's a game that, like, I came a bit late. I was a typical POM. For the first 3 years, I was like, I ain't interested in aerial ping pong. Give me football. I won't name the AFL player, but I did coach an AFL player, and I remember my time, my boss was genuinely disappointed that when I was like, oh, a footballer, have you ever had trials with like Man United or any of the teams in Europe? And he's like, nah, AFL, mate. And I'm like, oh, pretend football. I was like, keep trying, mate. Maybe you'll get there one day. But it is an infectious game, isn't it? The outside and the inside. It is a game that really encompasses what it is to be Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think that Australia has so many wonderful things about it. And Australian rules is one of them. Like, it's Australia's game, and it's typical that you got two Englishmen talking about it. But I'm an Aussie citizen now, so what can you do? I'll claim my Australianness if I can, when I can, and I love it to bits. And it's one of the great things about living in Australia. And in fairness, living in Victoria is how much media attention the game gets, how surrounded you are by it. Even now, right? It's the middle of December. We've got the AFLW trade period happening. We've got the AFL time trials and the pre-season training. The drafts just happened in the men's comp. even now, when we're so far removed from the men's season finishing and starting up again, there is so much coverage around it. And it's crazy. And I love it. It's like, oh, just throw out a random name. Toby Travalia has just impressed well and trained well. And so from Essendon's won their 2K time trial. It's like, it's great. It's so good. Like, even the little things like that, I just can get around.
It definitely needs a Gillette Soccer Saturday, doesn't it? Like
I was thinking about this when I first moved over.
It's the one thing the AFL lacks. Like, maybe that's the show we should do, Ollie. Maybe that is the most English thing that I think we could bring to AFL that AFL lacks.
Should I get the pitch ready for Fox Footy? Is that what we should? What, do I just be Chris Kamara? That'd be great. I think the only drawback with that, it'd be hard to do because you can't just cover the top flight. Then you have to do like an around the ground. You have to do state leagues. You could do the best part of local leagues, because there's only the one game. Whereas obviously in England you've got.
No, agree. Yeah. We're lucky that everyone kicks off at the same time.
Yeah, which that's what makes the show great. Like, whenever Blackburn were away, just sit in front of the TV and watch Jeff Stelling do his thing. And if you don't know who Jeff Stelling is, for Australians here, how would I describe? He's just the icon, the main presenter of Sky Sports, or was when I was growing up. Kind of like, iconic wise, it's like if you cross Bruce McElhinney as a commentator with, I don't know, with anyone, with any host, with any TV host you see on Fox Footy on their Super Saturday coverage or whatever, combine the two, and you've got Jeff Stelling. He's great. But maybe we could do something. Maybe we talk to the higher ups and get something going.
Mate, I don't think there's anything better on a Saturday than a cold beer and watching four people talk about text on a screen. Like, it's the hardest thing to describe to someone who hasn't witnessed it.
How silly is it when you boil it down to an insular like that? Like, that's not the way to sell it, but the essence of it is so wonderful. I agree that is what it is at its core, but it's great.
Yeah. You know what? I actually showed my wife it a couple of years ago because I used to legally watch Sky Sports in my living room to keep up to date with all the other scores. And one day my wife woke up and was like, "What are you watching on the other screen?" And I'm like, "Gillette Soccer Saturday." Like, I was like, "This is telling me about every game that's going on while I watch this game." And that was how she described it. She was like, "You're basically watching four people talk about text popping up on a screen and then getting excited about it." And I was like, yeah, you've nailed it. Well done. That's the synopsis.
Brilliant. Love it. I love it. Could you imagine? I'd love to see whether it's us or anybody try that and see if it works. It'd be harder to do, obviously, because obviously every game in the AFL is televised, so people can watch it. But maybe you know, it's so good. I love it. I do love it, and I think that it was what my childhood was built on, really.
It's probably something that should be done, because I do feel like the state leagues don't get enough love. Like, that's probably my big criticism of AFL as a competition, that it kind of, unless it's the VFL doesn't really get spoken about unless a top player comes back from injury and plays in the reserves, or some of the top draft picks, Jagger Smith, players like that who may start round one in the VFL. That's where the big focus goes. But round 8, VFL, Coburg versus Frankston, no one really cares. And I find that quite sad, because I think, a bit like I did in the UK, the state league football sometimes is more exciting than the AFL football.
And let me tell you, if you're not acquainted with Frankston Coburg round 8 on a Saturday, you're missing out. They're the best games. Two standalone teams having a go at one another. They are some of the best games. Some of my favourite games I've ever done have been down at Frankston, or even away some grounds that I've been to further out for me to go to. but the standalone grounds, the standalone teams, where that is the sole focus, you've got no AFL alignment to worry about. They are so good. It's the essence of state league footy, and the aligned clubs are great, but there is so much to love in the VFL. And if you're not in and around the VFL, if you're in and around the VFL, you love it. You love everything. You love the success stories. You love the close games. Like every time we see, as a commentators union, I'll speak on behalf of them, which I don't usually do. If we see a Sean Manor go into Geelong, if we see Werribee have had about 4 or 5, Aiden Johnson, Riley Bice, they've all gone up. Don Brew training with the Bulldogs. We are so hard cheering for them. We want them to do as well as they can. There is a number of players, a number of different, people that we've watched do well, both in the VFL and the VFLW, that we want to see do as well as possible, because at the end of the day, broadcasters, we're in the same position. We are working as hard as we can in the league that we love to try and find something in the AFL. And of course, that's not in any way trying to be disrespectful to the VFL, because the VFL, even in itself, is a wonderful comp. But there's so many people trying to work away to try and find a dream in the AFL. And I think the VFL, for commentators, for broadcasters, and also for players, is a wonderful place in which to do that. And to be involved in the VFL for so long, hopefully that involvement will stick around. There's nothing quite like it. And I think, I love it to bits, and it's an awesome competition, no matter if you're a fan of an AFL club looking for a standalone result, or an aligned result, I should say, or if you're just a fan of footy in general. The VFL is a gold mine. The VFLW is a gold mine. Other state leagues, I'm sure, are the same. Of course, a little bit removed from the Sandful and the Waffle because we're not in those states. But I'm sure that everybody in and around those comps too would say the same.
Mate, it's the closest we have to like non-league footy. Like it's something that I always say to anyone going over to the UK: if you really want to enjoy yourself, if you're in London, don't go to a Chelsea Arsenal game. Go to a Leyton Orient game. Like, bit of a lower league game. You'll see like that community vibe, because the EPL clubs are so far removed from the community, but then the league clubs, the lower league clubs, they're still active, and it's a huge thing, isn't it? Like being able to smell, touch, and feel part of that connection.
Yeah, and you see it over here with the VFL clubs. Like, particularly you go to, I think Werribee was one example that I've seen. They've got all the Werribee flags around the town, particularly when they were making the run to the back-to-back grand finals that they've been in. I remember doing the prelim for the first grand final that they had last year against Brisbane, and the town got right around their team. Now, I don't live in Werribee, but you can tell that sense of connection's there year-round, I feel like. And I think speaking to people from Werribee, speaking to people from Williamstown, there's so many people I've spoken to at Frankston down here who feel that connection. And I think that if you're disenchanted with the AFL, with the top flight at any point, find your local VFL club, find your local club, whether it be, well, for me, the MPNFL or the Northern Footy League or the Eastern Footy League or whatever. There's always fun to be had with Aussie rules. And it doesn't have to be the glitz and glamour of the top flight. There is so much fun to be had lower down. And it's the great thing about the game is, no matter what league you're watching, there is always a sense of community and a sense of fun to be had.
Mate, I think you've nailed it. And like, for the people watching at home, Ollie, 2025, what's the plan? Where can we go and find you?
Well, the plan with 2025, I'm going to say recently graduated. Depending on when this comes out, I might have had the ceremony. I throw the cap in the air about a week from now as we record this. So the floor is open now. It depends wherever I want to go. I can maybe go, hopefully still in the VFL or in a state league somewhere, depending on where I go, trying to find full-time work. So if that takes me out of Victoria, I don't know, but hopefully calling the footy, and long-term, the dream obviously is to get to the AFL. That'd be the dream, just to keep telling the stories of some awesome Aussie rules football moments as I've been doing over the last few years. But yeah, the plan is to be commentating footy and football somewhere, But across my channels, I'll be obviously posting all the games that I do and raising awareness. And if that's in Victoria, if that's elsewhere, who knows?
Well, Oliver, mate, you've been an absolute dream and a pleasure, and I'm sure the Pommy and Oz army will be eager to hear, and we'll definitely be sharing them on our socials as well. But, mate, you're a legend. Thank you very much for your time, and it's been great to hear a fellow Pommy talk about an Aussie game.
Likewise, mate. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad, oh baby's hella